I've served 22 and a half years in the United States Army. During my tenure in the United States Army, I was called upon from time to time to be involved with what we call UFO crash recoveries.
This is Ivan Ivanov, and you are watching UFO Disclosure Bulgaria. We have the documents. We have the witnesses. True stories about UFOs, visitors from outer space and other worlds.
I've served 22 and a half years in the United States Army. During my tenure in the United States Army, I was called upon from time to time to be involved with what we call UFO crash recoveries. And yes, UFOs, although it's rare, have from time to time crashed due to mechanical malfunction, accidents. They are just as subject to having accidents and having mechanical problems as we are in our own aerodynamic endeavors as far as aircraft, helicopters, things of the sort, and even our spaceport. Accidents unfortunately occur, and they are not immune to that effect. We have had probably on several occasions been successful before we realized it wasn't the right thing to do in shooting down some of their aircraft, but that's only when they figured that they were safe. We knew that they were there and that we would not go ahead and take any hostile action. Like several times, and I'll tell you right now, I believe there was an incident that occurred in Fort Benning where they felt safe in letting their guard down because they felt that they were invited to observe the testing of a new weapon there. Unfortunately, only those that needed to know were advised, so you had military troops out there, and they didn't see it that way. They actually trained their weapons on the UFO and brought down at least one UFO. I don't know too much about that. I wasn't involved, but I'm well aware of the situation that occurred. And I remember when I was in Las Vegas giving a talk, when the young man that first started talking about it approached me and told me of the incident. And I know that a lot of people were, no, it's probably not true, it's probably not true. Well, you can never do that. The worst thing you can do is say that a person is lying, because that may come back to bite you. During my endeavors in the military, I had things that happened that I know that I'll never be able to prove. The reason, they're not going to give you documentation. They're not going to let you walk out of a sensitive departmented information control facility with information that's going to back up your story. And, when you say I was involved with the recovery of UFOs, the official stance of the U.S. government and other developed nations of the world is that UFOs don't exist. The whole situation is there's been a conspiracy among all of the major nations of the world to control that information and keep it from their own peoples, to not let them know that UFOs do exist. They are not only of extraterrestrial origin, but many of them are also of multidimensional origin that can have interaction within our own dimension. We have made steps, and I can only speak officially from, let me rephrase that, unofficially, from what I know our government's done as far as investigating UFOs. During the advent of the Second World War, we naturally became astutely aware that there was something flying in the world skies. We thought they were enemies, we thought they were new weapons of the Axis powers, and of course the Allies felt that, they were weapons of the Axis powers, and the Axis powers felt that they were new revolutionary weapons of the Allies. And that was not the case in either way. In 1943, due to an incident that happened in China, MacArthur became astutely aware of the fact that UFOs were in fact real. And I would suggest at that time he came into possession with one UFO. We had the Office of Strategic Services at that time that probably started to gather information on UFOs, or should I say interplanetary spacecraft, because the only thing that they could identify with at that time was something of extraterrestrial origin. Later, as a result of the National Security Act of 1947, the CIA came into play. The CIA had a astute interest, although they deny this, into UFOs. And they started their investigation into UFOs. And they say they have released all the documentation they have, and that's currently on their website. Well, that's totally untrue. In July of 1952, there was a tremendous amount of sightings over Washington, D.C. One of the most significant events took place on the night of July 26th, 27th of 1952. On this night, there were UFOs being picked up over Washington, D.C., flying even right over the White House. In two specific instances, they scrambled F-94s to try to intercept the UFOs. In the first scramble, the UFOs were intercepted by the F-94s, but as the F-94s were being victored on the station where the UFOs were, the UFOs went ahead and moved off radar and actually vanished from radar. At that time, the two F-94s were directed to RTB, or return to base. They returned. As soon as they returned to base, the UFOs were now back on the radar scopes, both at several Air Force bases and at Washington International Airport. We scrambled another flight of F-94s to intercept the UFOs there. When we scrambled the second flight, one of the aircraft, because they couldn't tell, they didn't have height planning equipment, so they couldn't tell the altitude of the UFOs. So one F-94 went low, the other one went high. And at about, I think, 15,000 feet, I'm not sure, but the one that went high, all of a sudden, was told by the radar controller, Washington International, that the UFOs were all around him, closing in. The pilot says, well, I don't see anything. He's looking around, and all of a sudden he starts to come back and says, hey, wait a minute. And he said, now I see them. They're all around me. They're closing in on me. They're coming closer, 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 and this was all being observed on radar. And everybody was kind of, a little excited about what was going to happen, a little tense, because they didn't know whether the UFOs were going to go ahead and destroy the aircraft or what. Finally, the pilot says, they're moving away now. He says, I'm going after the one that's right in front of me. So he was given pursuit, trying to intercept the UFO that was still visible to him in front of him. He said, I'm going to afterburners. And that was so the aircraft could reach its maximum speed. The then radio back says, I'm at my maximum speed now, but the UFO is pulling away like I'm standing still. And the reason we know about this is because the pilot was talked to reporters once he landed and had not been debriefed and told not to talk about it. Well, this might affect a lot of religions that were saying that, God made all this for us. And they're going to have to go ahead. That doesn't destroy God. It doesn't destroy the belief in God. What it does is go ahead and demand questions with truthful answers. And the situation is that now that we recognize not only are we not alone, but there are greater intelligence than man out there. And that greater intelligence is visiting us here on Earth. And not only is that greater intelligence coming from other planets and from within our solar star, within our universe, but we have visitors from other dimensions, parallel multi-dimensions. So now we have to ask, what part does this play? And also, we're going to have to ally the fear that, because it's only human nature to fear the unknown. And when we fear the unknown, we want to strike out against it and we want to destroy it. Well, I can remember when I used to tell my mom and dad, take me to see a doctor, it'll make the monsters go away. Who was I calling monsters? Well, Corona's one of them, and I consider him a friend today. But there are other people out there. There are people, even as we speak, children, young people, that are being selected. The next generation of people who are going to be the interfacers. And governments can't teach interface. Governments have to find these people and bring them into their service. And a lot of times that's covertly. No one told me when I got in the military that that's what I was going to be. And they were just saying, well, if we had more data, we could go ahead and make an identification. Well, wait a minute, wouldn't that be in the category of insufficient data? Remember, unknown is where you have what appears to be all the data you need to come to some type of conclusion, but cannot, because it doesn't put it in any of the known categories along those lines. So ultimately, you were left with a large percentage of unknowns, and that large percentage would go to approximately 20%. With the Air Force now saying you need to reduce that percentage rate, and eventually at the close of Blue Book in '69 they had effectively done that. They got it down to 7.6% unknowns. But they did that by introducing phrases such as possibility, or possible, or probable, aircraft, possible or probable, birds, balloons, meteors. So if they go ahead and hit up on that, and what happens is that after the media hype died down on particular cases, that possible and probable, that was removed, so it became now, this is what it was. It became a known.
You want me to investigate flying saucers?
I want you to help me prove to the public the truth. They don't exist.
Now it became identified, no longer in the category of unidentified. When Blue Book closed in '69, if you'd go back over the 10,000 plus cases that they investigated, you would find out that there's still approximately 20% of the cases that remain unidentified. Now we go ahead and say, okay, we are no longer investigating UFOs. We have no need to investigate UFOs because UFOs don't exist. Once again, just like with the rain, you say, it's not going to rain today because I don't want it to rain. Well, if conditions are right, it's still going to rain. By saying UFOs aren't real, then UFOs are real. So what happens here is that you want to get away from the term UFOs, and we made every effort to do that. Some of the people who are running for office for the President of the United States, Hillary Clinton's a good one, she goes ahead and she says, we don't call them UFOs anymore. We call them unidentified aerial phenomena. Well, actually, she got that term from the British government, actually from the Canadian government. A gentleman there by the name of Paul Hillard, I think his name is, because the British government has for the longest time referred to UFOs as unidentified aerial phenomena, not UFOs, but they're interchangeable. Now we go from 1969 to where we're no longer investigating UFOs and move forward. One of the things that in one of the memos, we call it the Bollinger memo, General Bollinger put it out. He stated in that memo that we don't need Blue Book. We don't need a special operation to investigate UFOs. If those cases that are UFOs that show a security concern or a security risk are investigated outside of Blue Book and are handled in other channels. Well, there's a good example of where UFOs were being picked up in the Caribbean, and those UFOs, like what and this was during the time of Blue Book, they never went to Blue Book. Actually, it was in the Air Force Security Service that gathered the data on them, and that information was sent to the National Security Agency. The National Security Agency will tell you, if you know the mission of the National Security Agency, you would understand why we have no investigative authority in this at all, which isn't really true. You have to understand the relationship between the National Security Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office. Once you understand the relationship there and their interaction with the Central Intelligence Agency, we want UFO disclosure, because from an official government position, we can come back and say, look folks, we already gave you all the information that we have, and it's all out there. We aren't hiding nothing, and you don't have to worry about that. Well, the problem within the UFO field, people not understanding, don't be going and asking for UFO disclosure. Asking for disclosure of unknown aerial phenomena that's been occurring all the way back since the beginning of recorded history. And there's documents within the Air Force files that also allude to this. You want to go ahead and take in the term, or take into understanding the terms we use nowadays. Fast walker. Fast walker is a term used to identify an object that is picked up by a radar in space that's looking down on the Earth. They pick up an object moving between the Earth and the radar. The object's moving too fast to be in the Earth's atmosphere. And it's definitely due to the telemetry and everything that they can pick up on from the radar. It's definitely an object. But yet it's unidentified. It's unknown. Now, in many instances, after we look at it very close, we find plausible explanation for most of these. But here again, remember the 20%. Nearly 20% of fast walkers remain unidentified. Okay, that's a term, and we have a catalog, but now government agencies, even though we know that the term fast walker is an official term, identify anyone to show any agency that has officially acknowledged the fact that fast walkers is a term and they maintain a catalog. I can show you government documents where they actually do occur and that they have this information. And that was by total accident, and there's nothing they can do about it because it's already out there, because fools like me are looking for these documents. And I have a pedigree. I can get it all the way back to where I got it from the government agency. Now we move on and we come to NORAD today. We come to the U.S. Space Command. We come to the U.S. Strategic Command. We come to the NRO. And there's two items they don't like to talk about. One is tracks of interest. Two, uncorrelated targets. Now, tracks of interest are normally tracks that are tracked by NORAD within the Earth's atmosphere. A lot of times these turn out to be aircraft, drug smuggling aircraft. But once again, 20% of those, and in this case actually, it is actually higher than that, but right now I don't have all the data that I need to go ahead and try and make a determination how much higher. But better than 20%, I'm going to put it that way, better than 20% of the TOIs, the tracts of interest that are logged by NORAD, remain unknown. Now we go ahead and we get to the uncorrelated targets. These are objects that are cataloged by NORAD, by the Office of the National Reconnaissance Office, by NASA, by the U.S. Strategic Command and the U.S. Space Command. These objects right here are in what we call deep space, orbital trajectories around the Earth, and near space. What we call a critical UCT is any UCT that is at least a meter square or larger. It takes sometimes up to 14,000 man-hours to investigate each of these UCTs. Right now, we are currently getting in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 UCTs a day. Many of those objects that have been up there for years and we have no idea what they are. Some are up there for days, weeks, months, then they disappear as mysteriously as they show up. But the whole situation is these objects are real. We don't know what they are. They do not correspond to any known spacecraft that we have put up there, any known space debris that we have put up there. They are physical objects. They appear to be under intelligent control, and I state that because they are in geosynchronous orbit. In several cases, they've taken course changes to avoid collision with other space objects, and that shows intelligent control. We are still trying to find answers and solutions for that, because remember, officially, UFOs don't exist. And, you know, a rose by any other name is still a rose. Well, forgive me for saying this, but manure by any other name is still manure. So I'm looking for the rose in a pile of manure. And the government does not want you to find that rose. They prefer for you they prefer it better that you smell the manure. Any questions? If tomorrow, 10 o'clock, disclosure was to occur, you would have some people most people going with their lives like nothing changed. You would have some people scared to death. You would have some people who would take their lives. You would have a lot of people wanting to know why the government failed them and not telling them earlier. And to make a long story short, all of us in the UFO field that says we believe the world is ready for disclosure, we don't know that. We don't know what world reaction would be. But we would be at a dilemma too, because the mission doesn't end with, we finally got it. We got the governments of the world to admit UFOs are real. Because now a major burden is going to fall on serious UFO researchers to help the rest of the world understand what is really going on and why there is nothing to fear. And I have to stress nothing to fear, because there are a lot of people out there who would disagree with me and say, well, their actions are hostile. No, their actions are not. But in many instances, we see them as being hostile. And you've got to be very careful. When a person's talking about UFOs, what is their motivation? Is the motivation to get the truth out there, or is the motivation to make a fast buck? If it's to make a fast buck, it's the wrong motivation. If it's to get the truth out there, then we are sharing information that will ultimately open a door to the reality of what's coming for all the world to see. And from that reality, we can go ahead and assess and draw our own conclusions. The biggest problem I see right now, worldwide, is that people want to be told what the truth is. Good example. I go ahead and I hear what they have to say, and I'm being told by the national media what Clinton has to say, what Trump has to say. Well, this election, this particular election, I'm worried about. And it's very important to me. And I don't want to know what a TV station or a news agency has to say, because the whole situation, their biases are there. You have Republican media, you have Democratic media. I don't care about Democratic media, I don't care about Republican media. I want the truth. And from the truth, I can then make an informed, intelligent decision of which of the candidates I think is more appropriate to run this great nation of ours.
What will be changed in the world after that disclosure? What change will happen?
A lot will change.
Like what?
We will, right from the beginning, realize we are not alone in the universe. Whether you believe in God or not, the universe had a creator somewhere along the line, because you had, billions of things that come into play that have to come in precisely at the right time for things to occur. From the beginning of the Big Bang, certain things had to happen before life, even on this one little pebble in the solar system, had its first microscopic life on it, let alone to develop into the sophisticated creatures that we are as the human race, and the other creatures that developed into sophisticated creatures. The whole situation is, we now have to say, okay, wait a minute, we're not the only life out there. Well, this might affect a lot of religions that were saying that, God made all this for us. And they're going to have to go ahead. That doesn't destroy God, doesn't destroy the belief in God. What it does is go ahead and demand questions with truthful answers. And the situation is that now that we recognize not only are we not alone, but there are greater intelligence than man out there. And that greater intelligence is visiting us here on Earth. And not only is that greater intelligence coming from other planets and from within our solar star, within our universe, but we have visitors from other dimensions, parallel multi-dimensions.